While all referendum campaigners will be spinning the result to minimise damage or maximise success, behind the spin, there are always high-level implications within the major political parties. Here to have a chat with about the result and what it means for Labor and the Coalition is political strategist and LNP Senator James McGrath. James, great to have you join me. Let me just ask you quickly about the Canberra bubble. It is very real. This ACT result proves it, doesn't it?
It so proves that the No campaign's line to vote against Labor's divisive Canberra voice proved that the only people who wanted it were the people in Canberra themselves. So Canberra is a bubble, and it's a nice bubble for the people who live here, but it's not the real world.
Yeah, amen to that. Okay, I think the result was actually a humiliation for the Prime Minister and Labor overall, but now they're trying to convince us it was just fulfilling a campaign promise. In your eyes, how much damage has the government suffered over this?
They've suffered a lot of damage. At least 30% of Labor voters voted no. You've got at least 43 Labor electorates who voted no. You had a Prime Minister on Saturday night whose disdain was so palpable you could bottle it. His contempt for the media, his ability or his inability to understand why Australians actually voted no. So what I saw on Saturday night was a Prime Minister who was out of touch and doesn't understand what is happening out in Middle Australia. And the number one issue in Australia at the moment is cost of living. And Australians have just seen hundreds of millions of dollars flush down the toilet because the Prime Minister wants to put his place in the history books. Shame on him.
Yeah, I think his priorities have been absolutely all wrong and it has done enormous damage to the country. But Labor are spinning that the Coalition and Peter Dutton in particular are now the wreckers rather than reflecting the will of the people. I think it's an absurd claim. But how do you think this is going to change the political trajectory for the Coalition? Is it going to give them a head of steam perhaps and maybe an opportunity to catapult themselves into a more competitive position, or is this just going to be a separate issue and forgotten in a couple of weeks?
I think it will give us a head of steam because of the failure of the Prime Minister to understand what's going on. What Peter and David and the Coalition have done is shown that we're a united force, but also have shown is that the issues we've been talking about, cost of living, housing, how we keep Australia secure, are the issues that people care about. Now, Labor were fascinating on Saturday. They were blaming Peter, they were blaming everybody apart from themselves for the result. And that says to me they don't really understand what's going on in Australia at the moment. But I'd also say, and I am the person, Corey, who always tries to find the cloud and the silver lining, that we did defeat 4 referendum questions in 1988, and it took us a further 8 years before we actually won a general election. Now, this is different circumstances. It's a different Prime Minister, and we've got a different leader of the opposition. But I think what Saturday showed to me is it is all to fight for this coming federal election. It is all to fight for, and people need to come together and realise we can get rid of Albanese within the one term.
Yeah, can I just go back to the 88 referendum? You may have a better memory of it than me, but the multiple referendums. But the idea was that they were administrative in principle, if I recall. And then this is a very divisive referendum. I've even thought about the Howard referendum on the Republic, but he was opposed to that referendum. He put it to the people for them to decide, but he was on the winning side. This has literally put a big rift through the country for no result, and they still won't examine all the failures that they've admitted have been happening around Aboriginal people. So I think this could do a heck of a lot of damage to the government.
I'd agree with you on that, because Australia is damaged, Australia is hurt, and people are cranky that this government spent all this money on a referendum that they saw would actually not help their fellow Indigenous Australians. And what is interesting is the seats with the highest Indigenous enrolment were the seats that had the highest no vote. So people actually understood that they live with their neighbours and their friends and their family who all know Indigenous Australians and thought, hang on, we're all one mob. This is going to divide us. So you're correct on the money there in terms of the difference between the 88 referendum and the referendum this year. The other thing I'd also point out, being a total bore, is that David Cameron resigned on the morning of the Brexit referendum. This is a referendum, by the way, that he personally did not want to hold, a referendum which he campaigned for the losing side, but he did the honourable thing, and on the morning of that referendum, when the result came through, 52-48, he resigned. Now, I will bet you a truckload of Mars bars, there is no way that Anthony Albanese has the integrity or the honour of David Cameron and that he'll do the right thing.
Yeah, and I bet Linda Burney won't be resigning anytime soon either, although I think she should. Now, let's look on the bright side of this, and I'm not saying just because a no victory was had, but I thought this was, and a lot of people are saying it was a particular victory for Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price. Some have even mentioned her as a future PM. Don't get caught up on the, she's in the Senate stuff. I thought it was a bit premature to say that, but how important do you think her voice was to this campaign victory?
Justina's voice was very important because she was able to take her lived experience of what is going on in Alice Springs and the neighbouring communities and camps and take that to Middle Australia. She was able to talk about what had happened to members of her family and say that this voice won't be helping them. She was able to take people on the journey from the middle of Australia, from the heart of Australia, to people's family rooms, their TV rooms and their kitchens. And she was able to explain in simple, cut-through language why the voice was going to be bad and why the voice was going to divide Australians. And importantly, she also pointed out that Bess, her mum, is full-blooded, but her dad, comes from the British Isles. And why should she choose one tradition over the other? Why should she be forced to choose? And the same with her own children. So she was the lived experience of why Australia voted overwhelmingly no on Saturday.
Yeah, I saw the interview with Jacinta Price's mum and dad on Sky News last night. It was fantastic to see, and it is, I think, a celebration of what is wonderful about this country. James McGrath, thank you. Have a good week in Canberra, and I'm sure you can, celebrate a little bit with your colleagues and fellow no campaigners. Thanks for joining me on Bernardi.